Hey everybody, this is Minion Soldier, and today we're taking another look at the Caterpillar and asking the question, is the Caterpillar undergunned? Now, as we saw from the early history of the Caterpillar, well up to almost its delivery in the game, the Caterpillar's forward prongs on the front of the ship. Now, seen right here in an image from the Buccaneer concept sale campaign, these were still somewhat appearing to be weapons. I mean, they were these long tubes, basically gun barrels with obvious little holes in the front, and so it looked like the Caterpillar had these two large forward guns on the ship. In the original write-up of the ship, of course, these were listed as two Class 3s, but non-equipped, giving you the impression that you could put weapons there, but the ship might not initially come with them. Now, of course, when the Caterpillar was finally delivered, we were told that those two prongs on the front of the ship were not in fact guns, and that they were non-functional elements and more or less decorative, which kind of led a lot of people to say, hey, you know, this is actually probably one of the lightest armed cargo ships in the game, but it's supposed to be, you know, a heavily armored pirate cargo ship. And that didn't really jive with a lot of people's thinking. In some ways, it has a lot lighter firepower than ships that are much smaller than it. Now, going back to the original write-up of the ship, it must be acknowledged that they said this ship will need a fighter escort to be used at least in combat, but most cargo ships would probably want a fighter escort anyways, right? Now, the current state of the game is far from completely fleshed out, and what we're playing right now is more or less just a tech demo, and it's not until 3.0 and beyond that we're actually going to start to see these ships more or less as they're intended to be, with the full item system 2.0 and with more and more ships and components coming online, allowing us to make critical modifications to the ships that we have purchased. Now, in the past, I've often made comments in videos which some people have taken issue with when I say, you know, once armor is implemented in the game, and they say it already is, it's already in the game. Well, no, it isn't, you see, because there is whatever armor values your ship has, but you aren't able to change that armor with anything else. And one of the things that was listed in the original write-up of the ship was that it was a heavily armored transport, and that could be one of the key features of the ship that we've yet to see fleshed out, which could help the ship along a long way. If we are able to attach supplemental armoring to the ship to make it much tougher and much harder to destroy, then that could somewhat change the nature of the ship and make it a lot better, or help it along if it can attach armor plating, or simply replace the armor plating that it has with something that is far tougher than other cargo ships could conceivably carry on their vessels. That could go a long way into making this ship into a full combat transport, so to speak, and making it a lot tougher opponent on the battlefield. Now, it's important to acknowledge, using this image here from the Dragonfly sale, that the Caterpillar somewhat can fulfill the role of a combat transport right now. I mean, here it is holding two Dragonflies in one of its cargo sections, and using these dimensions, you could easily see that the Caterpillar could fit up to 10, possibly 15 Dragonflies within it, using the 5 cargo sections as more or less mini hangars for these ships. Now, that could go a long way in a space battle, conceivably, to bridging that gap and making the ship to appear a little bit more heavily armed. But the problem is carrying those ships precludes the ability to carry cargo, or at least drastically limits its ability to carry cargo. Now, the limited speed and the limited size of the guns on the Dragonfly make this not that much of a defensive fighter in space, and probably the better use when fitting out your ship this way would be to land ground troops. If you're using your Caterpillar to land ground forces, then fitting out your ship this way kind of makes a lot of sense, because this way you can land up to, say, 30 troops with their attendant ground vehicles anywhere near a target and then deploy them. In the end, you're left with an all too familiar paradox that happens with a lot of ships in Star Citizen, which is, someone can point to the original write-up and say, well, it's a ship that needs a fighter escort, so that's just the way it is. But you really just can't cherry pick the pieces that you want from the write-ups to justify something and then just ignore the other things that were in the write-up, which is, of course, the other 2 guns that the ship was supposed to have that it never really had, and the armor, which realistically remains to be seen. The cargo modules that the ship is able to fit, once again, could mitigate this. Now, the cargo modules really haven't seen any real fleshing out since the original Jim Martin concept drawings, and though CIG had done some exploratory work on very rough models of the ship, none of these designs ever came to fruition, and in the end only the basic cargo module was ever designed, and we have heard really nothing since these initial first designs. Now, if you were to add the 2 missing guns, realistically, what are you getting there? Because those are size 3 guns as they were originally written up. Of course, the nature of the game has changed a lot since that first write-up, so that may not be the best idea, having a game designer have to go back, or at least a tech designer go back and then change the nature of the ship, change those mounts or add mounts to the front of the ship. It may take a little time to do. And then what guns can you mount on there? What guns would be decent for the ship? It could take a long time to figure that all out and balance it all out, but there is a way that you can change the ship using its existing weapons mounts and make it a lot more impactful, and also a lot more of a balancing act for the crew to manage. Now, one ship that could offer a solution to this problem is this ship here, the Hurricane. One of the unique features of this ship was the fact that on the back of it, it mounts a turret which has quad size 3 guns on it. Now, a size 3 gun may not be that heavy of a gun when compared to a larger ship like a Starfarer or any large cargo transport, but it is still a fairly impactful weapon, and much more impactful than dual size 4s that the Caterpillar currently carries. Now, of course, you can't simply take the turret off of the Hurricane and simply slap it onto the Caterpillar. There's going to be some, modeling changes that would need to be made. But taking the turrets that already exist on the Caterpillar and changing them so that they can mount different types of guns or different numbers of guns could allow you to accomplish this without having to change the model of the ship. So conceivably you could make it so that the turrets on the Caterpillar mount quad size 3s instead of dual size 4s. Now, of course, these weapons wouldn't be all that impactful against a much larger target, but they would make the ship much more effective at screening itself against fighters. So that could give the ship itself a fairly effective anti-fighter screen in its turrets, but then, once again, that flies in the face of the original write-up of the ship. But you could make that as an option. So let's say you could take the guns up to, say, possibly 2 size 5s. So you could have a weapon that's much more impactful against a larger target, but far less effective at shooting down fighters, or you can downsize the guns to these quad-mounted size 3s, and then, say, have much more impact against fighters, but much lighter impact against a larger target. By changing the turrets to either have dual size 5s or quad size 3s, you kind of give the operators of the ship a bit of a choice. Now, you can have heavier guns that will be much more impactful against larger ships, but you will probably have a juggling act to perform in terms of heat or energy expenditure versus your ship's shields. Now, if you take the guns down to quad size 3s, it'll make you a lot more effective against smaller targets, but then a lot less effective at managing heavier targets. However, you'll probably have an easier time managing the ship's heat and energy expenditures. By giving players these options, you're now making the fitting of the ship a bit of a juggling act. So, depending on what kind of situation they may find themselves in, they may choose to go with the heavier guns and have a bit of a juggling act to perform in terms of energy, or they may want to go with the lighter guns and have an easier time with energy, but perhaps a tougher time going up against larger opponents, making the ship a lot more interesting and precluding the chance of just one size fits all cookie cutter outfitting for the ship. Anyways, those are just some of my thoughts on the current state of the Caterpillar and what changes could be a good idea moving forward with Star Citizen. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.
Quantum travel initiated.